This lesson discusses searching the PHP and MySQL documentation. The topics include: where do you find the PHP and MySQL documentation? How do you search the PHP and MySQL documentation? And finally, how are the documentation entries organized? The PHP documentation is located at php.net/manual. You will then be redirected to the documentation which suits the language which is detected from your browser. If you need to view the documentation in another language, you simply select from the drop-down box on the main page of the documentation. When searching the documentation, you can search according to category. So you'll notice there's a section on getting started, installation, language reference, which includes syntax, types, variables, expressions, etc. Down further, there's a discussion on security, features, for example, dealing with forms, handling file uploads, safe mode, connection handling, command line usage, function reference, which groups the functions by category. So we see, for example, date and time, command line, file system, database, mail, etc. Then moving down further, some further in-depth information on PHP, which is referred to as the Hacker's Guide to the Zend engine. Zend Technologies is the company responsible for maintaining the PHP language. There's then a list of frequently asked questions, and down below a list of appendices, which give you information about updates to the PHP language. So for example, from 5.1 to 5.2, 5.2 to 5.3, and 5.3 to 5.4. You'll also notice there's a discussion on the PHP INI file and the directives which control the behavior of PHP. If you know a specific function, or at least the prefix to the function, you can simply type it in the search for box. Let's say, for example, that you want to find more information about the is functions, but you can't remember a specific name. You can simply type in is underscore. You'll then get a series of manual references, and down at the bottom, you'll get a function list. This will most likely give you the name of the function that you're specifically looking for. If you know the name of the function, you can simply type it here. For example, let's say we're looking for the subster command. You type in subster, hit enter. It will then take you to the exact reference for that particular command. You'll notice on the left-hand side, it will give you the category into which that command fits. If the command forms part of what's called a PHP extension, it will give you information about that extension. You'll also see related commands. Since subster is a string command, the commands that we see on the left side are all string commands. String commands are commands that perform manipulation on blocks of text. Looking at the syntax now, you'll see on the left side the data type of the return value for this function. In this case, as it is a string function, the return value will be of data type string. We then have the name of the function itself, subster, followed by the parameters or arguments which can be supplied inside parentheses. The parameters, which are in square brackets, are considered optional. This means that at a minimum, you need to specify the string and the start position, but you do not need to specify the length. Moving down the page, you'll see there is a description of each parameter. Within the description boxes, in most cases, there will also be a usage example. In this case, it demonstrates how to use the subster command with a negative start parameter. Within the description for length, which is optional, we also see a description of various usage examples of the length. Return value is described next, followed by a change log. Following that, we have some basic usage examples, showing you typical usages of the subster command and the result which is indicated at right. Also, at the very bottom of this page, you'll see related commands, and finally, user-contributed comments which have been screened by the PHP community. It's very important to note that the user comments oftentimes include very substantial blocks of code, which are all certified as running and are extremely useful to us. Switching over now to the MySQL documentation, you can access the MySQL documentation by locating dev.mysql.com/doc. On the left-hand side, you'll see the various versions of MySQL that you might be working with. In this case, the current version of XAMPP installs version 5.5. You'll see a general reference in the center. At the right is a navigation section which looks for specific categories of commands. These include a tutorial which helps you get up and running on MySQL very quickly. You'll also see information about administration, security, optimization, the language structure, which shows you the various aspects of the language used to communicate with MySQL. And again, on the right-hand side, you'll notice further information, storage engines, functions and operators, data types, and that sort of thing. If you need to search, for example, let's say we're looking for examples on the select command, you'd type in select, click on go. You will then see some specific references to the select syntax. So for example, if we move to the first example, we can see the general syntax for select. Anything in square brackets is considered optional. And then further down, some specific examples. So for example, here, a very basic arithmetic result, an example using a join command, and various other examples. Each example will involve various aspects of the select command. In review, where do you find the PHP and MySQL documentation? You could go to your XAMPP installation, select documentation, or you can go directly to www.php.net/manual and followed by the language of your choice. The MySQL documentation can be found at dev.mysql.com/doc. You can then go to a specific version by substituting 5.0 for the version number that you plan to be using. How do you search the PHP documentation? On the main page, you can search by category, or alternatively, in the search for box, you can type in a function name, a word, or a phrase. How are the documentation entries organized? They will give you the return value, the syntax, and the parameters which are expected. There are notes on each parameter. You will also see usage examples. At the bottom will be approved comments from various developers. How do you search the MySQL documentation? You would go to dev.mysql.com/doc, and on the right-hand side, you will see a navigation structure which allows you to search through the documentation for various categories. You can also type in a word or phrase in the search box and find specific information. This concludes our discussion of searching the PHP and MySQL documentation.